A pantry that runs 9 deep without a refrigerator sounds like the setup to a doomsday video. It isn't. This is just how an ordinary Japanese kitchen was stocked for a very long time before the fridge and the bottled sauce aisle quietly took the job over. 9 plain things on a shelf, most of them a few dollars, most of them good for months or longer. But one of them is the reason I wanted to make this at all. Somewhere in Japan there is a jar of these that was packed in 1576, and it is technically still food. By the end I will tell you which of the 9 it is, and the simple reason it never went bad. A shelf, not a plug. That is the whole idea, and it is worth sitting with, because it is close to the opposite of how your kitchen works right now. Walk into a modern kitchen and find the biggest appliance in the room. It hums. It is the one machine in the house that never switches off, running day and night, all year, turning electricity into cold so your food does not turn on you. We built the entire way we shop around it. You buy fresh, you refrigerate fast, and then you race a clock. Half the fridge is a holding pen for things that are already dying, the wilted herbs, the leftovers you meant to eat, the vegetables going soft in the drawer. Most of us throw out real food and real money every single week, and we have quietly agreed that this is just the cost of eating. Then there is the row of bottles that comes with it, a carton of stock, a jar of instant dashi granules, about $4, gone in a couple of weeks, a bottle of some pre-made sauce, $3 to $6, that you rebuy on autopilot without thinking. None of it is expensive on its own. That is the trick of it. It is $4 here and $5 there, again and again forever, for flavor you are renting instead of keeping. Now set the 9 things on the shelf beside all of that. A tub of miso, a strip of dried kelp called kombu, a bag of dried bonito, dried shiitake mushrooms, a jar of salted plums, a sack of rice bran, rice, a bottle of soy, salt. Most of them cost a few dollars. You buy them once, a little goes a long way, and they sit at room temperature for months or years without asking anything of you. It doesn't hum, and there is nothing to rebuy every week. A shelf, not a plug. Here is what I want to be straight about before we start, because the honesty is the whole point of this channel. I am not going to tell you to unplug your refrigerator, and I am not selling you a bunker. What I am going to do is walk this shelf with you, one thing at a time, and show you what each of these 9 does, what it costs today, and why it keeps. 3 of them are hiding something science did not have a name for until the 20th century. And one of them, the one from that jar, is the reason anything on this shelf keeps at all. In my grandmother's house, none of this was a project. It was just the shelf. So let's start with the 3 that do the heavy lifting, because these are the ones the hook was about. 3 plain, dried things that between them are a big part of why Japanese food tastes the way it does. In most kitchens, the deep, savory base under a soup or a sauce comes from a can of stock or a jar of granules. On this shelf, it comes from these 3, and you make it fresh in about 10 minutes from things that have been sitting dry for a year. The first is kombu. It looks like a strip of stiff black leather, and it is dried kelp, a sea vegetable. You wipe it, drop it in a pot of water, warm it gently, and pull it out before it boils hard. What you are left with is kombu dashi, a clear, clean stock that tastes deeply of the sea without tasting fishy. A bag of dried kombu runs about $6 to $10, and a single piece the size of your hand makes a whole pot. It keeps for years in a dry cupboard because it has almost no water left in it, and almost nothing can grow on something that dry. Here is the part people get wrong. There is often a fine white dust on the surface, and folks assume it is mold and scrub it away. That dust is flavor. Leave it and never boil kombu hard, or the stock turns bitter and slick. The second is the one I really wanted to show you, because it is one of the strangest foods on earth. This is katsuobushi. It starts as a skipjack tuna, which is then simmered and smoked over a fire again and again for weeks until it is bone dry. The traditional high grade goes one step further, fermented with a specific mold and sun-dried over and over, and that is what makes the finest blocks so extraordinarily hard. Most bags of flakes on a shelf are the simpler smoked kind, but the real block is not soft in any sense. It is a hard, dark block that looks and sounds exactly like a piece of wood. Knock two of them together and they clack. It is often called the hardest food in the world, and I mean that literally, because you cannot cut it with a knife. To use it, you run the block across a blade set into a wooden box, the same tool a carpenter would recognize, and it comes off in pale, papery shavings. Think about that for a second. It is a food you serve with a woodworking plane. Those shavings dropped into the kombu stock give you the classic dashi under miso soup and noodle broth. A bag of the ready shavings is about $5 to $12. The whole block keeps almost indefinitely if you keep it dry, though once you shave it, the flakes lose their aroma over a few weeks, so keep them sealed. The third is dried shiitake mushrooms. You soak them in cool water for a few hours until they go soft and meaty, and you get two things at once. You get the mushrooms themselves, ready to cook, and you get the amber soaking water, which is a stock in its own right. Pair dried shiitake with kombu, and you have a full stock with no animal in it at all, which is exactly what Buddhist temple cooks have used for centuries. Drying preserves the mushrooms, and it also makes them taste stronger than they ever did fresh. A bag runs about $5 to $12 and rehydrates into meal after meal. The mistake here is dumping that soaking water down the drain and rushing the mushrooms in boiling water. Go slow and cool and save the liquid. That liquid is the point. Now, I told you 3 of these were hiding something science could not name until the 20th century. It is these 3. Each one is quietly loaded with a different savory compound, and when you use them together, the savoriness climbs far higher than any one of them could reach alone, in a way no cook could explain and no chemist had words for until surprisingly recently. Hold that thought, because it is going to reorganize this whole shelf by the end. For now, keep it simple. These 3 are the flavor engine. The next 3 are alive. The next 3 are alive, and they are held together by the same quiet trick. Where the first group was preserved by taking the water out, this group is preserved by salt and by time, and by a friendly mold called koji that Japanese cooks have been growing on grain for centuries. Koji, salt, and patience turn 3 ordinary things into 3 of the most useful jars in the kitchen. The first is miso. It is a paste of soybeans, salt, and koji, packed together and left to ferment for months, sometimes years. A spoonful stirred into hot stock is miso soup. A smear on fish or eggplant before it hits the heat is a glaze. Thin it with a little vinegar and it is a dressing. A tub costs about $5 to $10 and lasts for months because you use it a spoon at a time, and because the salt and the fermentation keep it safe at room temperature the way they always have. The lighter, sweeter misos are young. The dark red ones have been aged longer and taste stronger. In Japan, there are families who have been making it the same way for 8 generations. The one thing people get wrong is boiling it hard, which turns it dull and grainy and kills the aroma. Stir it in at the very end off the heat. The second is soy sauce, and it is basically miso's liquid cousin. The same koji, the same soybeans, and salt, plus the one thing miso leaves out, roughly an equal weight of wheat, all brewed as a wet mash, aged, and then pressed into that dark, salty liquid you already know. Here is the honest catch worth knowing. Real soy sauce is brewed slowly over months, and there are breweries in Japan that have been making it in the same town for 300 or 400 years. The cheap stuff on a lot of shelves is made in a couple of days with acid instead of thyme, and it tastes flat and harsh next to the brewed kind. A bottle of the real thing is only a few dollars, up to maybe 8 or 10 for something special, and it lasts a long time. Read the label and buy the one that was actually brewed. If a shelf like this is quietly starting to appeal to you more than the humming machine and the row of bottles, you are in good company. A lot of people are slowly restocking one corner of the cupboard this way again, and subscribing is the easiest way to walk through the rest of these with me, one plain thing at a time. The third is the one that asks the most of you, and I am going to be straight about that because this channel does not pretend. It is nuka, which is simply rice bran, the outer layer that comes off brown rice when it is polished into white. On its own, it is dust cheap, often a byproduct you get almost for free. But mix it with salt and water and let it come alive, and you have a nukadoko, a living bed of bran you bury vegetables in. A cucumber goes in overnight and comes out a tangy, crunchy pickle. Carrots, daikon, whatever you have on hand. The bed itself is full of the same broad family of lactic acid bacteria that sours yogurt, and it does the preserving for you. Here is the honest limit. That bed is alive, and it expects a relationship. You turn it over with a clean hand almost every day, and if you neglect it for too long, it will sulk and sour and can spoil. Tend it though, and it lasts for years. Some families have kept the same bed going for decades, turned by hand every day, and handed down like a sourdough starter you can eat out of. So that is the living half of the shelf. Miso, soy, and a bed of bran, all of them running on salt and thyme instead of electricity. A shelf, not a plug. Which brings us to the last three, the plainest of all, and to the one among them that has been sitting in a jar untouched since 1576. The last three are the plainest things on the shelf, and also the oldest idea on it. These are the keepers. The first is rice, which barely needs an introduction except for one thing about how it keeps. White rice, the polished kind, will sit in a sealed bin in a cool cupboard for years without going off, because it is dry and because the part that spoils has been taken away. That part is the bran, the oily outer layer, and it is the very same rice bran we just buried vegetables in as nuka. Brown rice still has it, which is why brown rice tastes richer but only keeps for months before the oils turn. So the polishing that gives you white rice is also what lets it store for years, and the leftover bran becomes your pickle bed. Nothing wasted. A big bag is cheap, cents a bowl, and a single sack feeds a person for a long time. Keep it dry, keep it sealed against pantry moths, and it waits for you. The second is the least glamorous thing here, and the reason everything else works. Sea salt. Salt is a mineral, so it never really spoils, and a box of it costs a few dollars and outlives you. But the deeper point is that salt is the engine under this entire shelf. The miso, the soy, the nukadoko, the pickles, all of them lean on salt to stay safe. And here is why. Salt pulls the water out of things, and the tiny organisms that rot food cannot live without water they can reach. Take the water away with salt or with drying, and rot simply has nothing to work with. That one idea is most of this video. Every keeper on this shelf is some version of it. Which brings us to the third, and to the jar I promised you at the very beginning. This is umeboshi. It is a small ume, a fruit closer to an apricot than a plum, salted heavily and dried in the sun until it shrivels and turns fiercely sour. The deep red color most people picture comes from red shiso leaves packed in with the fruit. On their own, salted and dried, the ume are closer to a dull tan. Traditionally, it is packed with about a fifth of its weight in salt, and the fruit is intensely acidic on its own. Put those two together, deep salt and hard sourness, and you create a place where the things that cause rot simply cannot grow. And that is the answer to the riddle from the start. Somewhere in Nara, a family is recorded to have packed a batch of umeboshi in 1576. Those plums are about 450 years old. They were pickled before there was a shogun in Edo, before most of the countries watching this existed, and they are still sitting there, still preserved, still technically food. No one has been tending them. Salt and acid closed the door at the start and never opened it. Now the honesty, because it matters here most of all. That near immortal plum is the old, heavily salted kind. A lot of what is sold today as umeboshi is made low in salt for a milder taste, sometimes with added sweeteners, and that version does need refrigerating and does not last like the old one. And even the real thing is not a health miracle, whatever the internet tells you. It is extremely salty and extremely sour, which is exactly why it keeps and exactly why you eat it a sliver at a time, tucked into a bowl of rice. A good jar runs about $8 to $15 and will outlast almost anything else in your kitchen. A shelf, not a plug, and one plum on it older than your whole country. So that is the shelf. 9 things, no refrigerator, most of them a few dollars. But I told you at the start, these 9 were more than a list, and that 3 of them were hiding something. That is the part I have been saving. Here's what those first 3 were hiding. Around 1908, a chemist in Tokyo named Kikune Ikeda got curious about why a simple kombu broth tasted so satisfying, so deep, when there was almost nothing in it. He studied the kelp and pulled out a single substance, glutamate, and he made a bold claim. He said this savory quality was a basic taste in its own right, a 5th one to sit beside sweet, sour, salty, and bitter. He gave it a name, umami. A few years later, in 1913, one of his students found the matching substance in dried bonito flakes. And in 1957, another Japanese researcher found the one in dried shiitake. 3 plain things on a shelf, 3 different savory compounds, each pinned down by a different scientist across 50 years. But the real surprise is what those compounds do together. They do more than ADD up. Put the kombu one and the bonito one in the same pot, and the savoriness multiplies, climbing far past what either could reach alone, which is exactly what a bowl of dashi is. Kelp and dried fish together on purpose. Japanese cooks had been combining those 2 for centuries, entirely by taste, long before anyone could tell them why it worked. The Pantry had solved umami synergy generations before a laboratory could even name it. That is what was hiding in the first 3 jars. Now let me be fair about what is and is not special here, because I promised honesty. Preserving food by drying it, salting it, and fermenting it is not a Japanese invention. Every culture that faced a winter without a refrigerator did some version of it. Salt cod, dried mushrooms, cured ham, sauerkraut, preserved lemons. The physics is the same everywhere. What is particular to Japan is this exact kit of 9, and the flavor system built on top of it, the dashi and the umami that turn plain, preserved things into the base of a whole cuisine. So why did most of us let it go? There was no conspiracy behind it. It went quiet for the most ordinary reason there is. Someone bottled the result. Instant dashi in a jar, stock in a carton, sauce already mixed, all of it saving you the 10 minutes and the small skill of doing it yourself. Convenience is genuinely convenient, and there is real money in a bottle you finish and rebuy, and almost none in a strip of kelp that lasts a year. So the skill slipped, 1 generation at a time, until the shelf became a mystery instead of a habit. You do not need to unplug anything to get a piece of it back. Start with one thing, a tub of miso and a strip of kombu and a bowl of real soup you made in 10 minutes. That is how a pantry like this was always built anyway, one plain old thing at a time, added slowly, kept for years. In my grandmother's house, it was never a project. It was just the shelf, passed down without ceremony. Tell me down in the comments, what is the one shelf-stable thing your family always kept no matter what? And did anyone you knew keep a pickle crock or a pot of miso going? I read them. If you want to keep going through these with me, one steady thing at a time, subscribe and I will see you at the next one. A shelf, not a plug. It kept people fed for a very long time, and it is still right there, waiting to be used.